Welcome. Come on in. I'm so excited you could join us today. I'm your host, Lonnie Phillips, and I am so excited to be with you all today. We're going to have a conversation that I think is long overdue. We're going to talk about how do we release some of those limiting narratives. So come on in. As you're coming in, why don't you type in chat where you're calling in from? I would love to see where you're calling in from around the world. So come on in. Glad to have you. I also want you all to know we are multicasting tonight. We are actually multicasting on LinkedIn Live. We also have viewers joining us from YouTube, and we also have it running on Twitter. So I don't know where you are out there, how you're watching us. We're just grateful that you were able to join us today. So come on in. I see some Houston, Texas in the house. Hi, Nakia. So glad to see you. Just really excited tonight. I know I've been away for a number of weeks. Thanks for your patience. I have really, as you all know, especially my first time viewers, as you know, I kind of do this in the evening. It's just my way of giving back. And so I have just been swamped, just trying to take care of my day job. I also am a wife and a mom, and I've been trying to take care of my family, trying to stay healthy myself. And I just have that juggle that I do. So I am so excited to introduce to you all our guests and then to really get this conversation going. Hello out there. I see Rob, Eve, David, Yemi. Oh my goodness, y'all are calling me from all over. Jamie, hello there. I am so glad. Deandra, Menu, I don't know. Is it Manu? Manu from Houston? Oh my God, I see a lot of new names out here as well. Just welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's give it a few more minutes and allow people to join, and then we're going to jump right in. So, for those of you just joining, please type in where you're calling in from. I see Olympia, Washington. That's awesome. Dallas, Texas. That's where I'm from. That's where I was raised and grew up. So that is home. I actually have a home in Houston also. So that is pretty cool. Looking forward to going to H Town for the Thanksgiving holiday. So I'm really excited to get closer to Thanksgiving so I can be with my family and the people that I love. Mr. Roper just joined. Narisha just joined from Seattle. Jason joined from Austin. Hello there. Welcome, welcome. So, let me go ahead and get started. I see you all rolling in, but I just want to say thank you. Modern Mentoring has just been a passion project for all of my new users. It really was my way to just really help scale my mentoring efforts. Mentoring is something I'm very passionate about. And during the pandemic, it was a rise in requests for people who really wanted to be mentors. So I had to figure out a way to touch more people in a scaled way. And really, I try to use this platform to really help support the people who are trying to figure out corporate America and how to thrive in corporate spaces. But don't feel limited to that because I try to pick topics that we can all use in our life. Today we're going to be talking about releasing those limiting narratives that we all have and tell ourselves that are kind of up here. And I was talking to our guest and a few other people about this topic. And one of the things we all agreed is not many people are willing to admit the conversation that they're having in their head that really is getting in the way of their success. So I want to run through a few that I just kind of picked up that I've seen on several different platforms that I want you to ask yourself, what is that limiting belief or that limiting narrative that you tell yourself? How about I'm not good enough? How many of you feel like you're either too old to do something or you may even say, I'm too young to do something? Have you ever said to yourself, I'm not smart enough? So you hold back as a result. Oh, here's a good one. How about you say, I don't have enough experience? How many people look at job descriptions and you decide if you want to go for the job or not? You see what they're asking for and you say, you know what? I don't have enough experience. I'm not going to go for that. Or have you ever told yourself you're not going to be successful at something? How about I don't have enough education? I know people who just continue to keep getting education and then they still aren't doing anything. They just keep going back to school, collecting degrees, but they're not actually putting any of it into action because they just feel like they're chasing something, the credentials to hopefully get them somewhere. I think we all have narratives we tell ourselves, and we don't realize that it genuinely can hold you back. Well, I am real excited that today our guest, Brian Galencia, I just want you to know that he is someone who actually, through the Microsoft Give campaign, actually made a very generous donation and really wanted to spend time with me to really learn about this platform and just kind of have some mentoring sessions. And through our mentoring conversations, we just had some incredibly rich discussions about things that he was working on, challenges that he had in front of him. And we started just kind of strategizing on how he might move ahead. And through that conversation, I felt like more people need to be a part of this conversation. So we are so excited that we get to have him on the platform today so that you get to eavesdrop on this conversation and you don't just get to eavesdrop. You can actually drop your questions, drop your comments in the window, and we'll make sure that throughout our conversation that we are checking it regularly so that you can actually have us interact with you. But let me introduce you to our guests so we can get started here. First, Brian and his team are committed to empowering our partners, and he works with our ISVs. For those of you wondering what that is, that's our independent software vendors to grow their revenue with line of business applications built on the Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. He has been with Microsoft for a little over 16 years in various sales and partner leadership roles and has received various accolades, including our coveted Microsoft Circle of Excellence Platinum Club Award. He was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, and he holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Business from the University of Puget Sound. So, modern mentoring guests, I want you all to welcome Mr. Brian Galizia. Welcome, Brian.
Wow, Lonnie, thank you so much. I am so excited to be joining you in this conversation. Very humbled that I had the opportunity to not only learn from you, but I've been a secret follower of all these amazing conversations you've had with so many various people, and truly humbled that I've had the opportunity to share the stage with you and hopefully give a tidbit of insight and inspire people like you do, inspire people to just go and go, wow, I can do it. I can release it. And this conversation that we defined, because we pivoted
Yeah.
a little bit on LinkedIn, because we're both passionate about LinkedIn. We were originally going to do something around that, but I think this is such a super relevant topic. And so thank you so much. And it's really good to see. I see all these people joining, and it's like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
love some of the commonalities because some of the people that follow you also I know. So I'm looking at the list of names showing up. I'm like, gosh, there are so
Yeah.
many people that we've touched or had conversations with, and it's good to be on a call with you.
Yeah, well, I'm just so glad to have you here. But, we can't get into talking about the topic until we just address the fact that you've just come off of your sabbatical at Microsoft. So
Yes.
there is this award that we give our more senior leaders in the business. You get an opportunity to be rewarded for your years of service. I'm embarrassed to admit this, Brian. I don't know if I told you this. I've been awarded a sabbatical and I keep waiting to take it. I still haven't taken mine. And you get a choice of being able to take cash for it, or you can take the time off. So, hey,
Yes.
why don't you share with the audience kind of how long did you take off? And why don't you share what did you do? But more importantly, what did you learn during your sabbatical?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lonnie. So I would say, or maybe in this limited narrative, maybe we can find out an opportunity for you to carve out that time for yourself to where you can do that. And so, yes, I was very grateful that the leadership team that I'm a part of recognized me for taking the time off. And I got it a few years ago because, but as you everyone can imagine, I didn't want to take it because I'm like, well, if I was going to take time off, what's the point if I'm just hanging? And not that I love my family, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to go do stuff and you couldn't do that during COVID. So the good news is Microsoft allows you to actually defer it, and you can, to your point, you can hold on to it for as long as you want to. This was the year I decided, in working with my leadership team, this was the year I said, you know what, now's the time. I've been here, to your point, close to 16 years. And I'm like, gosh, what a great opportunity to take time off. And to your point, I talked with so many people, and we'll talk about like the board of directors and all those things, but I talked to so many people to get their perspective, particularly ones who've taken it, and ask, what did they do? What are things I should be thinking about? And the number one thing I got from people who took the money and took the time, everyone said, take the time.
Take the time.
Take the time. The time is so valuable. That money's money. Don't get me wrong, we all love money, but taking that quality time for 2 months was so impactful. So just very quickly, I mean, I got a vast array of things. For those of you who follow me or know me, I'm a big sports fan. So I got a chance to go to the Oregon Ducks, Georgia Bulldog kickoff game in Atlanta, Georgia. I know I look a little bit, I know I look a little bit younger, but I celebrated my 30-year high school reunion. So I went to my 30-year high school reunion, and that's a different story. Yeah, totally, Lonnie. I mean, we could have a separate conversation just about what that experience is like for anyone who's been attending high school reunions. But I took family vacations, which was, gosh, that was so fantastic. And then at the tail end, I was able to spend quality time with one of my close high school friends that I essentially have known since elementary school. He has a summer home in Santa Cruz, California. And for those of you who don't know where California or Santa Cruz is just outside the Bay Area. So I was able to spend that quality time. And to your point, what I learned, Lonnie, is that time is so precious. I think it makes you realize and appreciate that when you invest time in the places that you want to, it's amazing the types of things you get back, not just with family. And of course, I love my family. That's important. But it's also the people that surrounding you that you either call close friends, or maybe it's a colleague or someone that you haven't seen in a while. That quality time to have authentic conversations about what's happening, how you can support them, how they can support you, what's happening. It just makes everything more real. But then it also made me realize, Lonnie, I'm not ready to retire. I'm like,
you're like, that's too much time on your hands.
Too much time on my hands. I'm like, I love being able to go around, but I'm like, gosh, I miss the hunt of you get it. Like when you're at Microsoft and you are passionate about what you do, and you are passionate about, like you, I lead a team of people, and I'm like, I work with some amazing people. And of course, you mentioned with ISVs, I also work with a ton of great partners. And so that opportunity to come back with things that I learned and now apply it in a kind of a new way of thinking, because 2 months off and turning your brain off is a hard thing to do. And then when you come back, to turn it back on is a hard thing to do. But now that I've been back for almost 2 months now, it just, thank you for asking. It's such a refreshing opportunity to do that.
Wow. So you were gone for 8 weeks, right?
Yes. How many weeks? 2 months, full of all of August, all of September. And there's not really a great time. You can, because Microsoft, especially at our level, there's so many things that are happening, and you think, when's the right time to go do it? And it's like, I didn't want to do it during the holidays, because I'm like, that overlaps with the holidays. I want to do it separate, and doing it at the end of our fiscal year, not a good idea either, because there's so much activity. And when you start the fiscal year, that's just as hard, because we're trying to land all these things that are happening. But the opportunity to do it just at the tail end of the summertime, to where I got to spend quality time with my family before my kids went back to school. And then when my kids went back to school, quality time with my wife, and then quality time with really close friends was just really, really impactful. And I knew it had me refreshed to come back. And hopefully, if Microsoft will have me, hopefully I'll be here another at least 14 years, or maybe at least another 9.
I was about to say, no problem. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Plenty for you to do. Trust me. So tell me, what's one commitment you made to yourself while you were on sabbatical?
Oh gosh, one commitment I made to myself is I told my wife I need to carve out time for self-care. So what I mean by that is, during my time off, I thought I had all these things about doing workout and all that stuff, because you're like, okay, I don't have to work, so got to take care of your body. I didn't do any of that. And then I realized, okay, I got to get back into it because when I was working, I was very rigorous about consistency of doing that. So on my calendar, and I know people can't see my calendar, but on my calendar, again, people at Microsoft, this is my secret. I block out 7 to 8 every morning at West Coast time. That is my workout time. So if you're going to put book time on the calendar, have a conversation, I might decline it, or you're going to look at it and go, oh, he's busy, so you're not going to book it. So, which is happening. Most people, because they see free space, they go, oh, Brian's available. Now I show that I'm busy. I also carved out time to take lunch. And during COVID, I think the one thing too, Lonnie, is that when you're in the office, it's a little bit easier because you get that natural break and you move from around and around. But when you're working from home and the demands that what we do, talking with our partners, all that stuff, they blur together. And so the one thing my wife says is like, you never leave your office. She brings me lunch in my office and it's terrible because I'm like eating while I'm doing stuff. I'm like, you know what? Time out. I'm going to put from 12 to 1 o'clock West Coast time. Again, reoccurring, it's blocked out. So I can still take meetings, but I try not to because now I have that freedom knowing that, okay, there's a block out time for me that I'm not doing anything other than walking away, and walking away is not like walking several blocks. It is literally going from my home office into the kitchen and sitting down with my wife to actually have a conversation and eat.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, and more of us need to do that. And I hope someone out there that helped them, because how many of us have just fallen into some very bad habits, right? And self-care has been low on the priority list, and it really should be higher on the priority list. So, all right, so let's go ahead and shift gears here. So, I'm ready to get into the conversation.
Yes.
So, why don't you define for our audience so that we're all working from the same common definition? How do you define limiting narratives?
Yes. Thank you, Lonnie, for asking that question. I think both of us would appreciate, and people listening on the call too, because I think we have this very diverse culture. I mean, lots of different people with a whole bunch of different backgrounds. And I think part of the limiting narratives that you and I talked about, Lonnie, is that how we grow up and the experiences we have, the learned experiences we have as little kids growing up to when we become adults. I can imagine, I'll put this in the window. I'd love to get people's perspectives. You think about myself, for those of you who don't know me, of course, I'm an Asian male, but I'm Filipino, a very proud Filipino. And so for any of you who know Filipinos, the culture of Filipinos is very ingrained in hospitality. Like typically Filipinos are in hospitality roles and also healthcare roles, nurses, caregivers, because of just the caring culture. The thing that was interesting growing up is that I went to a big high school in Portland, Oregon. And again, talking about 30-year reunion, I look back, even when I came back, and you look around going, wow, I am one of the very few non-white people sitting here.
Yeah.
And I look back going, gosh, did that do anything? Did that change anything? It was different because there was no one like me that I could model myself after because there wasn't anyone out there. So I would maybe take a pause, and for people in the window, I'd love to get your perspective. When you think about a famous Filipino, who comes to mind? I love to have people, without going and Googling it. If you can't, please don't Bing or Google it. If you think about like who is a famous Filipino, you come to mind, because you can think about it. Famous Black Americans, famous Hispanics. You can probably name people fairly quickly, but if I told you name a famous Filipino, you'd probably pause and go, let me see.
They're thinking. Some are actually out on Bing.
Oh, I love it. You know, I see one. So exactly.
So
Jason and Naja Rhythm. So I see a few. You're spot on. The number one person that I think a lot of people think about when they think about a famous Filipino is the boxer, Manny Pacquiao. Very famous boxer, and now he's in the politics. The other one that I'll say that maybe is not a good role model, I don't want to get into politics, but Ferdinand Marcos or Melda Marcos. And if you know those names, those were the, not prime ministers, but basically those were the president and the first lady of the Philippines for a long time. And Melda Marcos' claim to fame was her shoes, like thousands and thousands and thousands of shoes. So when you think about that in limiting narratives, Lonnie, it really comes down to growing up. I was always told by my parents, hey, Brian, you know what? When you work, let your work shine and people will recognize it. And let me pause and say that again, because I think maybe a lot of people on this call probably feel that way. When you think you're doing amazing work,
Yeah.
people think, oh, my manager's going to see it and I'm going to get a promotion or I'm going
There
to
you
get
go.
an offer or something like that. And so for me, I grew up that way. And it was hard for me to navigate initially the corporate world because being to have the ability to advocate for yourself in a way that wasn't boastful, but in a way that showed that this is the direction you want to go. You have confidence that you have that. And many of those things you talk about, Lonnie, these internal things that tell you, oh my, I'm not good enough. Or maybe like I'm doing great work and someone's going to recognize it. And I'll just wait another year because I'll just work double as hard because maybe I didn't work hard enough and maybe I need to show people even more. So when I think about limiting narratives, if that is really the thing that I don't know, I'd love to get people's feedback if you feel the same way, because that when I first started in the corporate world, when I graduated, and even when I started Microsoft 16 years ago, that type of thought process was just challenging. And when I've had the opportunity to then get the right, and I know you covered this in some of the other sessions, when you then have, we'll get to like some of the things you can do, but when you then have a set of people that you can confide in, your board of directors or your mentors or sponsors, which we'll get to, that type of feedback that you can take in and realizing that you are good enough, you are doing amazing things. You just need to document that plan and you need to be vocal about it to the right people so that people know. And that was so hard. I still have a struggle with doing that because that's just not my DNA. But I think sometimes you just have to step out of the box to be able to address those things. And so I'll take a pause, Lonnie, because I'm realizing I'm just talking a lot about. But hopefully the narrative was resonating. And I think, yeah, Eve, thank you. I mean, because Lonnie and I talked about that.
Yeah.
Not just me as a Filipino male, first generation in the U.S., but I think women and other people, diverse, underrepresented minorities might feel the same way. So,
but you got to think about, I know one of the things that I've learned is sometimes these narratives that we tell ourselves are informed by a set of experiences. These experiences could be, as you described, this is just how you grew up, right? And it was kind of bred in you that way, that you let your work speak for itself versus you having to be the one who advocates on your behalf. But you also have people that have trauma that informs some of these beliefs that are in their head. And I know we're talking about some of the negative narratives, but I'd also, and you and I were speaking about this, we also have people that have beliefs about themselves that are not necessarily accurate. But they have this belief about themselves that they are one way, and then they're still struggling to get to where they want to go. And remember that conversation we were having? It's around, they got blind spots.
That's right.
Because they have beliefs about themselves and they operate in the world like things are a certain way. And they just have all of these, it's misinformed. But I really love that in the research that I had done around limiting narratives is really around remember that their beliefs, they're not the truth. Right? These are things we tell ourselves, but it doesn't have to be accurate. It's up to us to decide if we want to believe it or not. So I really want to make this practical for people. And I know you've got, I think, right around 6 tips that you're going to share with them on how to release these limiting narratives. So I'm going to let you take it from here. Give me the first one, but give us time to pause and react, and we'll be monitoring for questions in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone for putting in the window, because both Lonnie and I are seeing it. And gosh, thank you, Yemi. I mean, and others, Eve, like, I totally can appreciate your comment. Thank you for being vulnerable too and saying, hey, you relate to this, because when Lonnie and I were having this conversation, we're like, oh my gosh, like we're living these same experiences, granted different angles of it, but some of these things really resonated. And so the very first step is identifying it. Is that limiting narrative true or false? And that is, you mentioned spot on, Lonnie, because sometimes that belief may be true, but then it's okay. If that's true, is that the thing that then you need to work on to get to where you want to go?
Right.
Or do other people believe that's true? Or the same thing, if it's false, then do other people believe that's true or the other way around? And so what you and
Right.
I talk about is kind of being mindful when there's certain cues. And I love that conversation we had. It was maybe a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, Lonnie, where you had told the story about someone saying something to you and taking that opportunity to pause and not react, but pause, think about it, and then come back and say, hey, can you describe more
Mhm.
about that? Just so that you're identified, like, okay, they said something, whether that's true or false, let me go in and try to validate and help, be curious. And that's the thing I love about taking that growth mindset and really embracing that and not reacting to it, but just saying, let me pause, let me think about it first, and then let me determine, okay, how can I ask more questions to seek the truth,
Yeah.
whether
So
it's true or
let
false, but seek it. So
seek the truth and identify it. And I think for some people, Brian, when you think about saying identify it, it means to pause for a moment and just recognize when the conversation is happening.
mhm.
And I usually say interrupt it. We can all kind of mentally, without saying it out loud, I'm going to interrupt this, just in your mind, just stop the thought and then go, what's going on here? And write it down, right? So if you see that you're having this negative conversation with yourself, find a way to interrupt it, pause, and identify what it is and just write it down. Don't judge it.
Mhm.
Not just look at it, own it, and just identify it in that moment. That's what I hear you saying. And let's give some shout outs here. Hey, Jumana, I see you out there. She says, is it true or false for you? We have
Yes.
to be careful to walk in our own truth. As a people pleaser, we can put others' opinions ahead of our own. That's the real work. And
Mhm.
that is so, so true. Because a lot of what's going on between our two ears up here is stuff that we really should not be holding on to. So, why
Mhm.
don't you go ahead and share with us tip number two?
Yeah, absolutely. So establish your plan. I think it's one of
Mm,
those things. Once you identify these narratives, then establish your plan as to how do you address them. How do you think about, is that a strength? Is that a development area? And what actions do you think you're going to go take to then
mm,
do that? And that's a very hard thing to do when you
mm.
hear something and you think, oh my gosh, true or false or whatever it is. And you know that, okay, for me to get to wherever I want in my career or personal life, there's these hard stepping stones you need to go do. And sometimes it's overwhelming to do that. And I love how you just said, write it down, because I think the first step is that if you don't write it down and you don't, or however you like to do it, whether you're writing it with a pen and paper or you
Or
put it in
typing.
OneNote or type it out, giving that space to where you put it somewhere
Yeah.
that allows you to look at it and come back to it and go, huh, for me to get to where I need to go with all these things that are whether true or false, and I need to work on that, or I need to have the ability to change people's perceptions. If you think that's the right thing to go do, then writing it down and building that uh,
Plan.
the plan to go address that is such a valuable thing, because then you're addressing it head on. It could take, and never feel like, oh my gosh, you could fix it in a day. Like, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. But why don't you make it real for him? Because I do not want to butcher your name. Nahi Ra Rhythm, something like that. Look on the screen. Forgive
Yes.
me for not pronouncing your name right. Why don't you use the example, if you don't mind, that you shared earlier? Because I think there were a lot of people in the audience that could relate to it, where you wanted your work to speak for yourself and having to be your own advocate. What would a plan look like? What if someone doesn't know how to put a plan together? So walk them through the steps of how you manage that, recognizing it's something that you always monitoring for and still working through. Why don't you share it through that example?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I've approached it is having what's called a career walking deck.
Mm.
And it varies. Like some people go, well, what would that look like, Brian? And it varies, but I'm just looking at mine because I always have it up now because I always want to determine, okay, am I doing the types of things what I've worked with you, Lonnie, and others, is like to try to go drive these narratives and the conversation. So it really helps me determine where am I investing time, what skill sets they're going to get, what experiences. And a lot of it starts with how you kind of start out to describe yourself. And that's a hard thing to do because you're like, okay, without anyone saying anything, really write down like, what does Brian stand for? What does Lonnie stand for? What does Naja? And I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name. Do those things about yourself to say, okay, what does that look like? And I'm just going to give you some examples. What would a next role look like for you? So talking career-wise, because of course this is modern mentoring, we're talking about careers. Just write down like what would the next role be like, and not just in the short term, but be very big and aspirational. And this is something you'd help me too, Lonnie, is like really hone in on, don't make it generic, like really go and say, I want to be the CEO of Microsoft.
Go big. Go big.
Go big.
If that's really what you want.
That's right. Exactly. And you're spot on. If that's really what you want, but think about that bigger thing, because then that helps you fill in the gaps on the journey, because it is a journey. You're not going to immediately become CEO one day. Maybe you will.
It doesn't happen that quick.
No, it doesn't. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe you start your own business, but there's a journey that everyone takes to go do that. And it's going to be different for everybody. So if you write that down, that helps. Then you think about, okay, what are the experiences you have that reflect on things that you're super proud of or things that make you different? Because I'm sure, Lonnie, if we just focus on, hey, who is Lonnie, and some of these things, like I'm sure all these people have listened to your various podcasts in the past. It's amazing because they probably have a point of view to say who you are as a person, which is amazing. You want that feedback. But on the flip side, you want to know, what is it for you? What do you want yourself to be known as? And what's your what I think other leaders at Microsoft have taught me is like, what's your superhero power? And I guarantee there's people, all of you on this phone call have a superhero power. Write that down, because then you anchor yourself on, you're not trying to change yourself. You are taking that superhero power and using it as your strength to then help you with the areas that you may not be as good at yet, or this narrative of, oh, I'm not good at it yet. Well, that's the thing, yet. Finding the opportunity. How do you take that superpower and relate it to something that you need to help with? So the other things I would say to get started is not just about you. Think about, we talked about core strengths, but when you think about the development areas, think about those, you mentioned blind spots. Think about those things that you believe or you've heard from other people that either validated or haven't validated yet. Think about those things that you know that you need to work on. And in particular, when you take the development area and apply it to the roles that you want to go do, identify those so that then people can help you. I think that's the thing that I learned, not just from you, but from other executive leaders, is that people want to help.
They really do.
But they don't know because they can't read people's minds.
That's right. You got to tell them what you need. So how does this relate back to, let's make sure we tie it right back to advocating for yourself, right? Because that was where you were struggling because you let your work speak for yourself. So you've got this career development plan, right?
Yeah.
And you got to be really clear, as you said, be able to articulate a little bit about yourself, superpowers, what you want, where do you need help. So what would be the next step in the process beyond the development plan? Is there another step that you actually put in your plan?
Yeah, I think it maybe goes to top number, or the step number 3 is the community. And so what you covered in past ones where you talk about mentors and sponsors and having a board of directors or stakeholders or people that you're confidants on, and think about it in many different areas. It's not just your manager, it's not just your skip level, but all these people from all these walks of life in your organization or outside your organization that you can lean on to say, who are the people that are going to help me execute on this plan? And one thing that when we first had in the dialogue, Lonnie, is you gave me such great feedback, because I sent you what mine was, and you gave me some amazing feedback that I still have to take action on, but I wrote it all down to make it enhance the way that I'm approaching it. But you got to take that information and utilize it, so where all these people that is your posse, or the people that you think are going to help you in the dialogue, and pick them wisely, because you don't want just the yes people.
No, I was
I
going
know.
to say that because that's what was special about our chat. You showed up with this level of authenticity, and you were willing to be vulnerable and say that, I'm challenged in this area, which really allowed me to have a level of empathy going into the conversation, to really want to share with you, here are some practical things I think you can do. So as people are evaluating who they want to be in the posse, as you call it, that's an old school term there. But it's still the right, I still refer to my squad, my posse.
Yeah.
But it's important to have people that you trust, so you can share some of these real thoughts that you're having and real struggles that you're having, so you can get the support to help you be able to start getting rid of some of that junk. Now, some stuff gonna require therapy. Let's just go ahead and accept that. I'm no therapist. Some stuff is deep rooted and it does come from trauma, all kidding aside. That's sitting in
Yes,
people's heads, and they
absolutely.
may want to consider therapy. And
Hmm.
trust me, I've laid on a number of couches in my lifetime. So I definitely am a strong proponent of get the help, right? When you need it. But I do want to say that I love your point around just making sure you have the group of people that you can go through and share and go to and share your plan with. So that's a good one.
Yeah, no, thanks, Lonnie. And I think I love you said that. I mean, I'll be vulnerable too, because I've same thing. I had trauma as a kid. I think most people, if we're all being honest, have gone through some type of trauma. And it's like when you go to a doctor or a dentist, you go for all these ailments. And sometimes I think for anyone who feels that way and go, oh my gosh, it's okay to feel not normal. I'll just
Yeah.
say that. Like that, when you see leaders and you see people going through what they're going through, like it's okay to be vulnerable and take that care that you need. And if you are fortunate enough to work at a company that gives you that, that's the one thing I love about Microsoft. Guess what? We can go to we can go to a
Mhm.
therapist, and it's okay to say that. It's like, hey, and work
It
through those
doesn't make you weak.
conversations.
It
No,
doesn't make you
absolutely.
weak at all. No.
Absolutely. So then the other ones I would say to tap in the community is, and you touched on it in prior ones, you have to, this is kind of a sub bullet point 3, but you have to be open to that feedback.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, especially when you're trying to identify that narrative and getting points of view, and I love how when you and I have that conversation, and when someone says something to you and you go, oh, wait a second, is that something that they perceive about me? Because I don't perceive my way, but it seems like they did. Having that opportunity to do it in the right way, not react to it, but be able to sit on it. And then if the timing's right, to go back and say, hey, you know what, that conversation you said, can we unpack that? Can I learn more about what you said, and maybe the meaning behind it? And most people are be open to it. And then whatever they say, the people who say that, you have to be open to receiving it. And sometimes that stuff is not pretty,
Now,
but
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because everybody says they want feedback as long as it's positive.
that's right. Exactly.
And
Just get
as
told me
soon
as
as
long as it's good.
And as soon as you give them negative feedback, then that's when some people actually take it personal. And this is not
Mm,
everybody, but
yes.
I've had both sides. I sometimes want to ask, are you sure you want feedback? I tried this strategy. You want the red pill or the blue pill? Do you want it straight, no chaser? Or do you want me to unpack it slowly so it has a slower effect on you? But some people really don't want the negative feedback. And
Yes.
when they get it, they immediately resist it and push against it. And I think, if nothing else, you should just listen, take it, and maybe, like you were pointing out, do it in two conversations. Maybe just stay quiet, listen. And if you're so frustrated and angry, just at the end of them giving it to you, just thank them for it and then just go process. Then come back and say, all right, I've had some time to take in the feedback you've given me. Now, can we unpack it a little bit? Because I am a firm believer, and I've seen this, I've been at this a while. I am disappointed at the number of people who do not have true feedback because when they're meeting with their managers or close colleagues, I bet you it's because they don't feel like they can give you the feedback or it's going to
Mhm.
be received, or they're afraid they're going to hurt your feelings, or they want to be like, there could be a multitude of things, but they don't give you that feedback. And then what happens when the managers get in another room and they're talking about talent and then they're discussing the real perceptions and experiences that people have had, and the other individual has no clue. And I just believe if more people were willing to really just ask for the feedback and literally just receive it without judging it, they will be so much better for it. And they will understand what's getting in their way from moving forward. Now, I did have one situation where a gentleman told me he's asked for the feedback and never has received it, but he knows something is blocking him. That one is trickier to navigate. But most situations, I would say ask for the feedback
Mhm.
and really respond to it well, because I'm surprised at the number of people who really don't know the true perception of the quality of their work and the perception or the experience people have with that individual. I'm
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, well said, Lonnie. And I think the one thing is, as leaders itself, is like I try to keep the mantra clear as kind.
Mhm.
And I think on both sides, like you have to be able to share it, but you also have to receive it, but also determining when's the right time to give it. Because if you start to feel like, oh, this person is feeling a little
You
way,
pull back. You
you pull
pull back
back. What
from
do you do? What do you do with
yeah.
it? And then you kind of have to figure out
Yeah.
the right conversation. Say, hey, it looks like you're reacting to something. Is this a good time to give it to you, or would you like to wait?
I
I mean,
love
sometimes I think that's the other thing too. So if you're in the manager or people leader type of role, I'm not good at it, but I've always thought about, gosh, if someone's reacting the way they're reacting, maybe it's the way I'm delivering it, and I need to get
Mhm.
better at doing that, or taking a pause, and maybe something's going on in their life that they don't want to hear it right now, and you're just like, hey, you know what? Is this a good time? Maybe we should
Mm.
pause and do it. So I love what you just said, Lonnie, because I think if we were all able to do that, oh my gosh, imagine the growth that everyone would have. We're not tiptoeing around
I
with
know,
stuff.
over here guessing, trying to figure out what works, what
Guessing.
doesn't.
That's right,
But
guessing.
you know what you made me think about, Brian? You made me think about the fact that because I know some of this is in my past, is when you grow up, and some people grow up and you have parents that just think you are the world and they put you on a pedestal. And then you have some people that grow up in families or whatever family, it can
Hmm.
be, whatever family. We all create our own special families. And people were very critical.
Hmm.
And if you grew up in an environment where everything you did, where everything was always under a microscope and they were very critical, what will happen to you is when people give you feedback, there's something that happens to you subconsciously that takes you back to childhood. And
Mm.
that's when those limiting beliefs start up in your head.
Hmm.
And I know that when that happens, you know what happens? You start to feel judged. And
Yes.
when you start to feel judged and you start to feel like someone's against you,
Attacking. That's right.
what happens? Or attacking you, what happens? Some people fight back and others retreat.
Hmm.
Some want to get the heck up out of there
That's
because
right.
this doesn't feel good.
That's
This
right.
reminds
Protection.
me of my childhood, and it starts making you feel like you're not worthy.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
stupid. You're all
Yes.
these things.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
it stirs it up. So one of the things that I think is so important is when you are talking to people and you need to give them some critical feedback, asking, like you said, Brian, are you in a space to really take this feedback in? Because I'm coming from a good place. I'm not sharing it with you to destroy you. I'm sharing it with you so together we can figure out how to help you overcome it. But
Yes.
if you don't establish the intent for sharing the feedback, you don't know if they're one of those kids that grew up thinking the world of them, or if they were the ones that were constantly criticized that felt like you're attacking me.
Yes.
Can you
So
imagine how that destroys them as they, well, it follows you as you become an adult?
adult, absolutely. Oh my gosh, like, oh geez, everything you just said is spot on. I was one of those kids that would retreat because I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to protect myself, shield up, I'm gone, or
There's a lot of
something
people
that
like that.
you turn off, and then like you see like they're there, but they're not, because
Mhm.
internally they're retreating into a turtle shell because that's their way to protect themselves. Or to your
Mhm.
point, you see the opposite where someone then goes hard back at you, is like, what do you mean? And they start to justify everything. And you're like, oh, wait, time out. And
Yeah.
gosh, that's so great, Lonnie. And I'm just looking at the time. I want to be conscious because
Go
there's three
ahead.
more
You only
topics.
have two more. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. And thank you so much, everyone.
I
I know
see everyone's
Susie,
comments.
gosh, Susie, thank you for saying best conversation. Wow. Thank you. Because
Oh, that's
when
nice.
Lonnie and I were going through this, we're like, gosh, this is real. This is real stuff that I hopefully people feel like they can relate to it and take some good takeaways from this. And I'm glad that we're seeing some of the feedback. And thanks, E, for joining and taking time away from family time to just listen. It's great.
I know. But I also want to say to our audience, and you and I know this, I don't care how senior you become in an organization, and I don't care how many accomplishments you have. We're all dealing with something
Mm-hmm.
that causes all this stuff to come up, right? And I don't care how perfect the face is, the game face on, and it looks like everybody's got it together underneath. We're all dealing with something. Some of us are just better at hiding it than others. And I think it's important to say that because I think the advice you're giving them, and I can't wait for you to share your last two. I do think everyone needs to understand, take it one step at a time and recognize that you may overcome it in one moment and then it'll show up again. Just know that is an ongoing thing that you have to continue to work on and practice. So why don't you go ahead and share your fifth tip?
Yeah, sounds good. So I think so pivot is with a purpose.
Mm,
And I say that because sometimes one of the best advice I got from a leader at one time when I moved jobs and I let them know that I was leaving, the thing that they asked me was, are you running to something or you're
mm,
running away from something?
mhm,
And I think you may have used that term before in some of your prior sessions or podcasts, Lonnie, but it's so important to know that when you take something or you're going to take on some other opportunity thing that you're going to go do, ensure that aligns back into, is that truly what you want to do because of the plan that you established? Because I think in my early in career, I would jump around thinking that was the best thing to do, but then just realizing that, wow, I was just leaving because I thought I was the grass is greener on the other side. But
mhm.
guess what? The grass is greener because, and I heard this analogy. I love it. The grass is greener on the other side because there's poop in it. I was going to say the other word,
Okay.
but yeah, but I'm like that was such a funny analogy because sometimes it's like, yeah, you just it's pretty green on where you're at, but then you're just going to the other side and there's more crap there. So I think a lot of it just comes down to just think about when you're going to do something, pivoting it because it aligns to your principles, aligns to your narratives, the things you want to do, and you vocalize it with your community. You establish that because that's the thing you believe, and people are giving you the feedback that aligns to what you want to do. Um,
Mhm.
we talked about so the fifth one before I get to the last one, because the last one I think pulls it all together. The fifth one
Okay.
is embrace failure as growth. Because
Oh.
I think a lot of us, even me, especially at Microsoft, we're all like, oh my gosh, we just have to be successful and all these things happen. But sometimes we don't have great days. Sometimes there's stuff that happens and you got to look back and go, oh my gosh, what did I learn from that?
Mhm,
Like we go into an executive meeting and we leave going, oh my gosh, I was not my best.
mhm,
Or you get the feedback and you're like, oh my gosh, I did terrible or whatever it is. But sometimes
mhm.
those are the best things that happen because you had that experience. So now you're like, okay, whether it be preparation or delivery or manner, whatever it is, you can kind of rewind the tape. I'm a big sports person, so you can imagine
Yeah.
any sports professional, the good ones,
Yeah.
watch film. They kind
Yeah.
of revert back and ask, and that's where the community also works too. Because if you're in an executive meeting or whatever meeting it is,
Mhm.
find that one person that you can trust. And I was given this by a really good mentor as well. Find that person that you know that could be that person that knows what you're trying to do in your career. And before that happens, you can ask them, hey, you know what? Can you do me a favor and observe these things and give me feedback afterwards, or watch for these things and see, it's like, was I at my best, or was I doing the things that exemplified the things that I'm working on to try to be better for whatever you're trying to do, promotion,
Yeah.
more senior role, whatever that is. And so I think that failure as a growth is so hard because we think that we have to be perfect. And I'll just say right now, you don't.
You don't. And I think that one is so profound because that is one, whenever you have a failure, it can stir up a limiting narrative
That narrative,
to
absolutely.
start to
Yes.
spin in your head that you're not good enough, that you have no business doing this job. No one's going to respect me. Whatever the conversation is that you begin to have, I believe sometimes failures stalls people. And for
Mhm.
some, they choose to run away. And I just want you to know that your advice is spot on. If you really start to embrace each failure as an opportunity for growth, to me, that's game changing.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, depends on who you work for. Some people really can beat you down and make you feel horrible about failure because you may have lost a deal or you didn't accomplish something by a certain timeline that they were expecting that delayed something else. But if you really think about it, it's really there to teach you something. So grab the lesson from it. And then
Mhm.
hopefully the lesson will inform how you approach it the next time. It'll either inform what you should do or what you should not do, right?
Right.
And then you take a different action that hopefully will drive you in the direction of doing something that will drive you towards success. But so many people spiral on failures or disappointments or where they don't feel like they showed up as their best. I'll be the first to tell you, I'll probably beat myself up worse than the other person because
Mhm.
I hold myself to such a high bar. And then I have to work hard at not doing that too long because then I start getting in my head and it's
That's right.
dangerous in my head. I really think you need adult supervision in my head. But it really is one of those moments where you have to stop it because there really is there's a quote, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
Yes.
To look at failures as this happened for me to teach me a lesson. Now, let me spend the time extracting the lesson from the failure versus sitting in judgment, shame, beating
Yes.
yourself up.
Oh,
You
mhm.
understand that causes those narratives to continue swirling in your head. So I love that one. You really
The
got to work hard at that
That's right, and you hit it spot on. It's the learnings that come from that failure so important. It goes back in the community, like whether it's your spouse or your best friend or someone you can confide in, don't hold it in. One of the things I really learned is that, gosh, the ability to even like, sit, like your point, if it's a trained professional that you can sit on someone's couch and let it out, great. If it's the fact that you have a best friend and it's like, hey, can we go to coffee and can I just
one.
share this? Laying it out is so helpful because then it's not sitting in there and you're like, oh my
So
gosh, guys,
healing.
it's
So
very healing.
healing. Just
Yeah,
to
very,
get it all
let it
out
out,
there.
let it out there, and embrace the messiness because we're all humans. We're never going to be perfect, and I love all those things you just said, Lonnie. So last one, and hopefully this wraps it all up because I didn't want to have too many steps. But I thought, gosh, this was originally the first one, but then when Lonnie and I were working through it with talking about, it, I'm like, this should be the last one because this ties a bow across all the other five. So think about this: hone in on your why and know your
Mm,
worth.
mm.
I was really thinking about this, and I'm like, gosh, that I don't know where it came from. It just kind of, I was trying to think about what are the key steps I would want to ensure that people on this amazing platform that you provide, Lonnie, hone in on your why and know your worth. Because if you know your why, you know, because everyone has a passion about something. At least I hope. I think everyone on this thread and the calls, people we enact with, it's so amazing when you can talk about something that really sparks a fire under someone, because it could be anything. It's amazing because when you get that thing that someone is so passionate about, man, they can solve world hunger because they are so passionate about dedicating their time. And we don't know what that is. It's going to be different for every person. But for you, when you can hone in on what that is and define that for you, that's the driving power that makes you want to do what you do.
That's a whole conversation all by itself.
It is. And then
know
you
your
talked
why
about
and your worth.
The worth. And you talked about it so well. I can't remember what podcast it was, Lonnie, but the worth, it's so hard because again, you have to advocate yourself. Especially the women on the call, the minorities on the call. The biggest thing I could say, and I'm not good at it either, I'm getting better. You have to advocate for yourself because you know the experiences and things you bring to the table. And so if you don't feel like you're getting that worth, then you have to think about, okay, am I in the right spot?
There you go. Put yourself in the driver's seat. That's what I say.
Yeah, I love it. Put yourself, you're not driving. Put yourself in the driver's seat and find, because there are places that will view you as, my gosh, you are someone that we would love to have. And that's where you do it. And not to say you have to leave your job, but always think about that, because that once you know that why and you understand your worth, building on those 5 other steps we talked about, that really then helps, again, going back to limiting narratives, that really helps to advance to where you don't feel stuck. You don't have these things in your head going, not good enough. Embrace that messiness and be able to act on it and do it in a way that's consistent and use your power, your superhero powers to guide you.
You know what I thought about on that statement is go where you're celebrated, not tolerated.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's a quote right there. I need a t-shirt. I love that.
I didn't come up with it, but I must tell you it's befitting for that. I have reached a point in my life where I don't want to work anywhere where I am just being tolerated. I want to make sure that my value, they see value in what I bring to the table, and they celebrate me for my strengths and my differences that I bring to the team. And if I don't feel that way, I have to go. You don't want to be anywhere where you're just tolerated. All right, so I know we're at time here. We're getting close. You got to go through quickly your 6 tips. Let's go ahead and give them really quick. What's the first one you had?
Identify it. Identify what it is, true or false.
That's right. Identify that limiting narrative. Go ahead.
That's right. Second one, establish your plan, career, or where you want to take whatever you want to focus on. Establish that plan. And hopefully some of those tidbits, please LinkedIn message me if I can provide more context of the template or things. If you're like curious, like, hey, what else should I put in there? Message me on LinkedIn. Happy to give that. Third, tap into your community, posse or board of directions or entourage, whatever you want to call it. The people that you trust, mentors, sponsors, all these people, and make sure that the sidebar to that one, make sure you're open to receiving feedback. Fourth, pivot with a purpose, making sure that where you go, you're not running away from something, you're running to something, because that aligns to your purpose, aligns to where you want to go. Fifth one, embrace failure as growth. And then, of course, what we ended on, Lonnie, is hone in on your why and know your worth.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think you can tell by the chat here that everyone is loving the tips that you have provided. I love the fact that they were all so diverse and different, and I think everyone can find at least one tip today that can really help them address these conversations we have in our heads. So thank you so much for joining, Brian. I hope you'll come back and join me again in the future. I want to thank all of our guests today.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. You had a choice of where you want to spend your evening. I just want to thank you for joining our platform. I'm not going to hold you any longer. Just be on the lookout, please. You can go find Modern Mentoring Village on LinkedIn. You will find the video immediately available out on YouTube. You can also access it on LinkedIn. I look forward to a future modern mentoring session, but I just want to thank you all for joining us today. So until next time, have a wonderful day and enjoy the holidays as well. Thank you for joining, everyone. Bye.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so
And
much, Lonnie.
thanks, Brian. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.